Hey y'all, it's Amanda here at Recipes Worth Repeating, and today we are making a banana bread recipe. But it's not your typical banana bread recipe. Today we're making a quinoa-based banana bread. And I know that may not sound very appealing, but it is absolutely delicious, full of moisture, and it's my #1 bread recipe on the website. People love it. They leave me comments saying how fantastic it is, how easy it is to make, and I'm going to show you guys how to make that today. First, let's talk about some of the ingredients that we're going to use, because again, this is not a flour-based banana bread. We're actually going to be using quinoa flour. And quinoa flour is one of those flours that you can find at your local grocery store. You can find it at Sprouts, Whole Foods, Amazon, anywhere. It's very readily available. So you've got 1 cup of quinoa flour, and that's the base of this bread. The second main ingredient is flaxseed meal. And if you don't know a lot about flaxseed meal, it's full of fiber and it has a really delicious nutty taste. So that's going to add a lot of extra flavors and a little bit of texture to your banana bread. And the other thing that you're going to love about this recipe is that it contains no sugar, none at all. We're getting the sweetness from honey and bananas. So let's jump into this step by step, and I'm going to show you how to make the most delicious quinoa bread you will ever taste. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to combine the dry ingredients first. So this recipe is typical to another banana bread recipe you've probably tried, where you put all of your dry ingredients in one bowl and then you do all of your wet ingredients in one bowl and then you combine them. Same concept with this one, but I'm going to also be using my KitchenAid standing mixer. It makes a huge difference when you start to actually combine the wet and dry ingredients. So I've pulled the bowl from my standing mixer and I've placed it right here because I want to use this to combine all of my dry ingredients. So let's talk about each one of the ingredients that we need for the dry ingredients. We're going to start with 1 cup of quinoa flour. And again, quinoa flour, it's gluten-free, it's higher in protein, and it is considered a power food. Quinoa is one of those foods that is just full of nutrition, full of minerals, which is another reason I love making banana bread with quinoa flour. You are getting a ton of nutritional value, and you won't feel guilty eating more than 1 or 2 pieces of banana bread because it's made with quinoa and flaxseed. So that's your base for this banana bread. Next is we've got 1/4 cup of flaxseed meal. Again, it's a little coarse. You pour it right in there, and it's 1/4 cup, again, full of fiber, full of protein, very nutritional. Then we're gonna add 1/4 teaspoon of salt. We're gonna do 1 teaspoon of baking soda and 1 teaspoon of baking powder. Take a wooden spoon and just mix those ingredients until they are well combined. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is, after these are combined, I'm going to then bring over my standing mixer, combine all of the wet ingredients. Then I'm going to attach my paddle attachment to the standing mixer and then get all the ingredients combined before we put it in the mold and then get it in the oven to bake. Now it's time to combine the wet ingredients. And we're going to start with smashing our bananas. You only need 3 bananas for this recipe. And let's talk about bananas for a few minutes. A lot of people like to use really overripe bananas, and that's totally fine. I like my bananas to look like this. Typically about day 3, maybe day 4 is when your bananas start to turn a little bit brown on the outside. You just really want to make sure that they don't get too brown and that black color, because they start to taste really bad in your bread. If you don't have time to wait for your bananas to turn ripe, you can always take a little bit of water, probably about 2 tablespoons, put your bananas in the bowl, and then use a masher to mash them. But again, that's only if you're in a crunch and your bananas are super ripe. So these are perfect, actually. And if you want to use organic, great. If not, It's your choice. I'm gonna go ahead and unpeel the bananas and get them added to the bowl. Go ahead and add them whole. You can go ahead also and break them in half. It just makes it a little bit easier to mash. And again, if you have some spots on your bananas, that's actually okay, no problem. Okay, then take a handheld masher, or you could use a fork, and you're just gonna start mashing your bananas. Again, the key here is to get them to like a mushy consistency. Think about if you've ever had kids and they're learning how to eat, and you mash up a banana so that you can feed your baby, but you don't want them to choke on it. It's kind of the same consistency we're looking at here. Okay, so as you can see, our bananas are nice and mushy. I like to leave a little bit of clumps in my bananas because when I take a bite of the banana bread, I like to taste just a little bit of the actual banana. So your choice though, if you guys want them completely mashed, your call. Okay, so now that those bananas are mashed, we're gonna go ahead and we are going to add 2 eggs. Get those added straight to the bananas. Okay, next thing is honey. You can use any type of honey, organic honey, your choice here. You need 2 tablespoons of honey. You can definitely measure this out. However, I eyeball measurements pretty well these days. So once you get 2 tablespoons of honey in there, you're going to add in 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. And then go ahead and use your masher. Get everything combined just enough to where it's combined. You don't want this to be perfectly mixed because again, we're going to add these wet ingredients into the dry ingredients. Use that paddle attachment to whip up our batter for the banana bread. So now that we have all of the wet ingredients combined, it's time to put on our paddle attachment to our standing mixer so that we can get this batter combined. Keep in mind that you don't want to use the whisk attachment to your standing mixer. That's really good for like making icings or meringue. The hook is also not really good for this recipe. That's great for making sourdough bread, sandwich bread. This is more of a moist bread, so you really need the paddle attachment for this. You're gonna have the best luck using the paddle attachment. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this put on my standing mixer. I'm actually just gonna take this off and I am going to pour in my wet ingredients right into the center of the dry ingredients. What I did is I took the dry ingredients and kind of pushed it to the side of the bowl so that there's a little hole so that those wet ingredients go right in the middle. Okay, then we're gonna put the bowl back on the standing mixer, get it locked in place. You're gonna lower your mixer, lock it, and then you're gonna turn this on the first speed, which is the lowest speed, and you're going to let it mix for probably about a minute, maybe a minute and a half. So let's go ahead and get this turned on real quick. And you're just gonna let it mix. And as you can see, the batter is starting to, it's still wet, but it's starting to look more like a bread mixture. So lots of moisture in here, but definitely a batter so that it's going to be the perfect consistency when you get it added to the mold. Another thing I like to do about halfway through the mixing process is just take a spatula and push down the sides of the batter, just so that those dry ingredients get really well mixed into the batter. So now that we have all of the wet ingredients and the dry ingredients combined, it's time to take the mixture and put it into our loaf pan and get it into the oven to bake. But before we do that, let's talk about the different types of loaf pans that you can use. Your standard loaf pan is typically a metal 9x5 loaf pan. And if that's all you have, absolutely use it. You're gonna have great tasting bread. But you need to make sure that you use about a tablespoon of butter and coats the entire pan. I was introduced to Flexi pans about 6 or 7 years ago, and they're made out of silicone and glass. They're very flexible. And I have fallen in love with these pans. And I don't have any affiliation with Flexi pans at all. I'm not getting paid to say, oh, they're amazing. I literally love them. And I'm not a baker. Like, I'm definitely a cook, and I smoke meats. And yeah, I do bake a little bit, but baking is not my strength. But when I use Flexi pans, my breads turn out amazing. So much that I have clients who ask me to make them batches and batches of banana bread because it's full of moisture. It never crumbles. And it's all because of the Flexi pan. So I'm going to be using the Flexi pan for my recipe today. And I'll put a link in the description to show you where you can order these. They have all kinds. They have ones for cakes. They have one for cupcakes, pans, anything that you can think of. All right, so let's go ahead and unlock our standing mixer. Let's lift up that paddle attachment and remove it. I don't like to waste anything. So I am taking my spatula here and I'm just getting the banana bread mixture off of the paddle attachment. Okay. Unlock your bowl. And you are going to pour in the mixture. You never want to fill it too high. Again, I'm not like naturally the best baker, and I've made so many banana breads in the past where I overfill them and they drip down to the bottom of the stove, and my husband walks in and he's like, are you burning something? Is our house on fire? So you really want to make sure that it's about 3/4 of the way full, because it is going to rise a little bit while it bakes because it's got baking soda and it's got baking powder in there. So make sure that you are not leaving any of this batter in the bowl. And you are going to get all of it added to your loaf pan. Okay, so once you get all of your banana bread mixture into your loaf pan, go ahead and take your spatula and you're going to even out the mixture in your loaf pan so that it is super even. You don't have to make it perfect, but you want to make sure that this bakes evenly, so try to get it level, okay? Now, because I'm using a Flexi pan, I have to use some type of pan with a hole on the bottom. This is just a pizza pan. You can actually buy these pans with the holes in them if you buy a Flexi pan, but I actually didn't when I ordered my Flexi pan. So I improvise and I use just a little pizza pan, okay? And this is important because the heat from the oven is literally gonna come through the holes and go up through the bottom of the pan, which again is made of silicone and glass. And that's the whole cooking technology. It ensures that your bread is going to be super moist. It's going to avoid any crumble. And this is like magic right here. I love this pan system. So what I'm gonna do is go ahead and take my Flexi pan. If you notice, it comes with a little wire holder, just to kind of hold the pan in place and keep the shape, okay? So we are gonna go ahead and put that in the middle of this pizza pan, and we are gonna put this in a 350-degree preheated oven, and we are going to bake the banana bread for 25 to 27 minutes. I just pulled our quinoa banana bread out of the oven, and it looks absolutely fantastic. I baked this for 25 minutes, but what I recommend you doing is at 25 minutes into the baking period, do the toothpick test. And what I typically like to do is just insert it into the side at an angle of the bread, pull it out, and as long as there's no moisture, it's done. Now, mine had a little bit of moisture, so I decided to bake it for another 3 to 4 minutes. So I pulled this one out right at 27, 28 minutes. So start doing that toothpick test at 25 minutes. You should never have to go over baking it for 30 minutes. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna remove the banana bread from the loaf pan. This banana bread has been cooling for about 5 minutes. Now, again, if you're using a traditional metal pan, it's going to need to cool for at least 30 minutes, if not 45 minutes. But one of the things that I love about the Flexi Pan is that it just needs to cool for about 3 minutes to 5 minutes, and then you can remove it from the pan, and it will be perfect. So let me show you exactly how this works, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and just take my pan. I'm going to turn it upside down. Kind of pull on the sides just a little bit, nice and gentle, and then I'm going to lift it up. Look at that perfect loaf. You cannot get those results when you use a metal pan, which is why I'm in love with the Flexi Pan. We're literally going to turn this little guy over, and you've got a perfect, picture perfect, bakery perfect loaf of bread. And I am getting ready to dive in. I'm not kidding. There was one day I literally pulled it out of the oven. It was hot. I grabbed some butter and I ate half of the loaf by myself. And we just have to be careful because it's that good, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and use a serrated knife, and I'm going to go ahead and slice my quinoa bread. A couple things here. I want you to notice that it's yellow, okay? That's the quinoa and the flax working together, okay? So it's going to be a little bit more yellow than your typical banana bread, but it is delicious. We're going to go ahead and take a bite. It's moist. I taste the chunks of the bananas, and it has that nutty flavor, and I didn't put any nuts in it. So let's recap on some of our expert tips to make this perfect loaf of quinoa banana bread. Again, it takes 3 bananas. Make sure they're not overripe. And if you buy the ones that are still kind of raw, almost green, you can still use those. Just go ahead and add about 1 to 2 tablespoons of water and get those mashed. Your consistency will still be perfect. 2, we don't use any sugar here. We're getting our sugar and our sweetness from the bananas and from the honey. Let's talk about storage of this banana bread for a couple minutes. What I like to do is wrap this in saran wrap, keep it on my counter for about 3 to 4 days. The saran wrap really helps maintain the moisture more than aluminum foil. So you can also store it in the refrigerator, but I really like leaving it on the counter. Another thing with this is that if you don't want a loaf, you can make these into quinoa banana muffins. Perfect for on the go, for snacks, or for breakfast. If you like nuts, you can add walnuts or pecans. Personally, I don't think this needs any nuts at all because of that nutty flavor from the flax, but totally your call. My husband loves nuts in the bread, so I'll probably make another batch and just add some for him. And then last but not least, definitely invest in a KitchenAid or a standing mixer. It actually makes a big difference when you're baking. If you use a handheld electric mixer or if you're using your hands, you're just not going to have the same results from a consistency perspective. It's a game changer. So if you don't have one, definitely consider buying one. It's going to take your baking to the next level. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and continue to eat my bread and try not to eat the whole loaf. And if you liked this recipe, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Make sure you share it with your friends and family, and follow me at recipesworthrepeating.com, where you can find over 300 recipes that your family is going to love. We'll talk to you guys on the next video.